Namaste everyone. We will start the webinar with the invocation of Sri Aurobindo's Gayatri Mantra.
तत्सवितुर्वरं रूपं ज्योतिः परस्य धीमहि यन्नः सत्येन दीपयेत्
Namaste once again, and a very warm welcome to the fourth chapter of Vaicariki. And the topic for the webinar is Death, Dying, and Beyond. We have seen in the last 1.5 years a lot of panic all over due to the pandemic. Death is indeed a big question, that what is death? What happens after one's dead, and how should one look at the death? Should we fear it, or there is an art of science to perceive death? Let us understand today in today's webinar. Today, we have esteemed Dr. Alok Pandey from Sri Aurobindo Ashram as a keynote speaker, Professor Joy Senji from IIT Kharagpur, and Dr. Vladimir Yatsenko from La Grace Sri Aurobindo Integral Life Center as a panelist, and Dr. Malaka Padiachi from Rashtram School of Public Leadership as the moderator for the discussion. With these words, now I'd like to invite Professor Sampadana Mishra ji to give the welcome address for the webinar. I welcome you, Sampadana ji.
Namaskar to all of you, and I welcome you all to this fourth chapter of Vaicariki, which started in the month of August with education as the first idea to be discussed on in the light of Sri Aurobindo. Then we took up the topic on Varna Jati. Then we took up the topic in the third chapter as nationalism in the light of Sri Aurobindo. And this month being Sri Aurobindo's Mahasamadhi month, so we thought of, we take up this topic, important topic, death, dying, and beyond. So for this, we have really the authority, I would say, on the topic, Dr. Alok Pandey as the keynote speaker. The whole idea is that we have in the keynote conceptual clarity about whatever is the topic, and then in the panel discussion. And today we have for the panel discussion Professor Joy Senji from IIT Kharagpur and Vladimir from USA, and Professor Malaji will be moderating the whole session. And here we contemporize, and then we see the relevance of what has been put in the light of Sri Aurobindo. So how relevant they are in the present time. And we know that death is something which is so gripping. This whole idea of death and the fear of death is something which every one of us were affected by. And we know that this is the eternal truth. Jatasya hi dhruvam mrityu, dhruvam janma mritasya cha. Krishna says, tasmad apariharyarthe. So why do you want to grieve over something which cannot be avoided? And then the most important verse in the Gita which says, though it is very assuring, very convincing, yet because of our narrowness of consciousness, because of our engagement with the external world, we still are not convinced. If something we talk about what the Shastra says, we know the whole philosophy of death, dying, but when it comes, when someone truly dies in front of us, someone who is dear to us, we also face the same problem. We also have the same nervousness. What happened to Arjuna? And this is where the great teachings are great ashwasana for all of us. At least they help us to take our life further. And Krishna explains very beautifully immediately after this, says that it is Vyakta Madhyani Bharata. Everything starts with from the Avyakta, then Vyakta, then merges in Avyakta. So he explains that nothing is going out of the existence. It is just starting from the unmanifest form to the manifest and again going to the unmanifest. Sounds really good. We understand it mentally. But how do we accept it? How do we put it into the real practice? Is there an art and science of dying? Do we know that how to die peacefully and how to accept death? These are all going to be the topic of discussion today. I welcome you all. And with these few words, I hand over the platform to Satyajit to take it forward. Dhanyavad.
Thank you so much, Professor Sampadananda Mishraji, for sharing the welcome address. I'd like to inform all our participants that we will have the talk for 1 hour, including a Q&A session at the end, followed by the panel discussion. Before I invite our keynote speaker, I'd like to give a short introduction about Dr. Alok Pandey. Dr. Alok Pandey is a seeker on the path of integral yoga. A psychiatrist by profession, he has had several encounters with death during the course of his medical practice. Being a philosopher by temperament, he raised several issues and sought answers to these both within and without. But neither the prevalent scientific and current intellectual notions nor the traditional religious and conventional spiritual belief could satisfy his quest or resolve deep existential issues regarding life and death, karma and rebirth, suffering and pain, and most of all, the goal of the human journey. It is only when he came in touch with Sri Aurobindo and the mother that he found these issues abundantly answered and the thirst of his soul more than quenched by the vast vision and cool refreshing springs of Sri Aurobindo's works and revelation. He is presently associated with the Sri Aurobindo International Institute of Integral Health and Research, Pondicherry, an institute dedicated to the work and vision of Sri Aurobindo in the field of health. I welcome you, Dr. Alok Pandey, to deliver the keynote address and share your thoughts on death, dying, and beyond. Professor Alok Pandey, over to you.
Namaste. Let me start with a paradox, because life presents paradoxes to us to help us grow. And one of the paradoxes that what happens deep within us as a conviction about life, about the world around, about our own self, our surface life seems to deny it. And among these denials, there are some beautiful denials, interesting denials. For instance, if you ask anybody deep inside, what do you want life to be? Beautiful or ugly? Happy or sad? Wise or foolish? Strong or weak? Answer will be universally the same, regardless of, where we are born, regardless of whether we have read a scripture or not, whatever be our gender, anything, the answer will be the same. But when we look at life on the surface, just the opposite. We want life to be beautiful, it presents an ugly face. We want love to be eternal, yet we see it broken with sometimes just a phrase or a word. We want beauty to sprawl all around us, but we see the ugly faces of creation all around. So one of these paradoxes is the phenomena of death. I use the word phenomena because before we make this fellow look as if he is ultimate, let's understand and examine that it's basically a phenomena. By phenomena of death, I mean that there is sudden disappearance of the person with whom we connected through a certain form and body. But is it the end? So there is we all know this well-known story in Mahabharata where all the 4 Pandava brothers go to take water from a pool and they all become unconscious because Yaksh has a question to them, and they are unable to answer. And then finally goes Yudhishthir, and Yaksh is none else but Dharmaraja, who asks him several questions. And the last question, as the story goes, is Kim Asharyam? What is the most surprising thing in the world? And Yudhishthir says, the most surprising thing is that we see people die every day. Yet we believe that we are not going to die. Actually, this answer can be interpreted in 2 ways. One is that we are foolish enough to believe that we are going to live immortally. That's how some people interpret it, that you are going to die. This sansar is nothing but, kshanik, it's transient. And to even believe or think about permanence is a foolishness. On the other hand, we can look at it just the other way, because the question is cryptic and the answer is also cryptic, that whatever be the appearances, there is something deep within us which does believe in immortality. So death as an appearance, is it really an appearance or a reality? So what we really see from the phenomenal point of view, that forms do disintegrate. It's not new to human life. It's true of all existences. Even stars are born and they die after millions of years, or whenever their light is over. So essentially, forms and their disintegration is part of creation. And seen this way, it maintains a balance, because if there is too much of crowding, whether in space or upon earth, it's not something very desirable. So forms do disintegrate, but where do they disintegrate? They disintegrate into the forms of energy, not only energy, but also information, which means somewhere in terms of consciousness. We see this also happening in our everyday life, something very similar. When we sleep, we continue to exist in the dream world, which is as real as the waking world. In the dream state, sometimes we remember that we are in a dream state. So dream within a dream. But more often than not, we experience life as real. If the snake is chasing you, we run away. If we see we are traveling in an aircraft with friends, we are with friends traveling in an aircraft. If we see that, we are on a road which is dark and, we are going in a cycle, we are navigating through the darkness. Or if we see there is a bright sunny field and we are walking through it, we are walking through it. But the strange part is that life doesn't seem to live on breathing. We just try to recollect that. It's very interesting that how does life exist in that mode? And it does exist at some level. And leaving aside our convention, it's very difficult to say, as one of the stories says, whether this is real or that is real. This is real in here and that is real in that domain. So essentially what happens is that life and existence change their modes. Even in our normal life, we see this. Nowadays, when we watch a television or when we are in our thoughts, life changes its mode. Yes, of course, here, because life is based on matter and its processes, we cannot live without it. But the fact is that existence and life, they cannot by their nature, they cannot die, but they change their mode of functioning. And this we can see even in our ordinary human existence, that from birth to death, whatever we call as death, there is a constant race between the two. And even when death seems to overtake us completely, yet it is a process of perpetual life. So that's something which when I learned in medical school, I was very surprised that none of your cells at birth are the same cells with which we die. They have changed over several times. And it is said that within 7 years' time, earlier people used to believe that the brain neurons, they live forever. But within few years, almost every cell of the body is changed. So we don't use the word death, we use the word reproduction. They have changed. So they brought out fresh cells and the old ones have died. In fact, because the old ones die, there is a tendency for new ones to form. So they are part of perpetual process of life through which a balance is maintained. If we really look at our own life, we can understand it. But something happens between this changeover that slowly the body loses its capacity to, it's no more that flexible, that freshness is lost. And over a period of time, there is more and more of disintegration, and eventually what we call as the phenomena of death. So why this happens? This is something very amazing at a very phenomenal level right now I'm speaking of. Salamanders do grow their limbs, and our famous lizard does grow its tail. There are trees which can live for thousands of years. So what happens with man? Why are we not able to continue this process without really a decline? There are several theories about it, but one of the simple things is that each cellular reproduction, it's like a carbon copy. So each carbon copy becomes weaker and weaker, something we see with virus mutations. So as a result of it, over a period of time, the carbon copy is feebler and the errors in the body accumulate. Over a period of time, there is a decline and death. There is another theory that there is a genetic programming. So every species has its genetic programming, and it's very, very fascinating that this genetic programming has something to do with two events in life. One is with breathing, and the second is with reproduction. Most animals, except human beings, they die once their capacity to reproduce is over. So there is nothing like menopause. That's why, we'll see that, animal species, they don't go through that. But in human beings, there is something like menopause. So it's like a second lease of life. And there is grandparenting, all these things are there. But most animals, their lifespan is limited to the period through which they can reproduce. So there is a link between reproductive capacity and death. And this link needs to be explored. There is a whole passage of Mother where she beautifully, interestingly explains that each sexual act is a step towards death. It's as if this energy can either be, degraded into sexual pleasure going downward, or it can extend itself horizontally into another santan, as that's how the cells keep changing. Or it can be turned upward toward the nectar of immortality. That's how the yogis, they try to take this energy upward. And it's extreme case, what is known as in Hatha Yoga as Khichdi Mudra. So people try to do it mechanically by making the tongue, touch the palate. But it's not something mechanical. When the whole consciousness is turned upward and goes upward and upward, the entire thing tends to point upward. And in an extreme situation, this can happen. And it is said that when you enter into that mudra, then you can actually taste immortality. It's a way of saying that yes, when the entire consciousness turns upward, it can enter into the realms of immortality. So what really is immortality and what is mortality? When we look at it from this point of view, mortality is basically because anything that is limited has a tendency. There are two contrary, seemingly opposite tendencies within each one of us. One is to expand towards infinity. This we are born with. Why? Because deep inside, again, we have an intuition of infinity. We are finite is our appearance, but deep within us, we have this intuition of infinity. That's why, when desire takes over a human being, he wants first one thing. After he has it, he wants another thing. When he has another thing, he wants yet another thing. When he has yet another thing, he wants few more things. When he has few more things, he wants everything, because there is this idea that we are infinite and we want to create it in finite terms. So 1 + 1 + 1, that's how we want to create, infinity. But obviously it's not possible. So this is one tendency. On the other hand, this tendency is to preserve the limits, the sima, the form. This tendency is equally there. These two contrary tendencies which are there, as if the form has a purpose. And if you look at it, the form has a purpose of actually creating a sense of individuality. Initial, it's like the shell of this, when we have these ice cream, some people like to eat it, in a cup or something, but some people like it with a cone. And originally, when you make an ice cream, old ways, I don't know how they make it now, but you put it inside a cone and then you put it in deep freeze. So now what does this outer shell do? It cuts off a series of forces. It's the same ice cream. When we used to have ice cream in villages, malai, baraf, then, you give it, there's the same thing, but they are in different cones for the sake of convenience. So form and name tend to limit the infinite, and thereby it helps to create individualities. So this is its purpose. And there we see the other aspect, which is very fascinating about death. I'm talking right now still only about the phenomena. We are not going into the metaphysical aspect. And that is what really holds this form. Shubhendu uses a word, half a phrase in Savitri: breath, fast, and frame. This frame is held by breath. So it means that the more we can learn to master the breath, the more we can actually live longer. This is exactly what is discovered in, with the animal world, that the animals which live longest, for instance, the tortoise and the turtle, who can live up to maybe 500 years and 300 to 500 years. And how many times they breathe? They breathe about 3 to 5 times in a minute. And the animals which die very fast, rabbits, for instance, they breed very fast and they breathe very fast. Both breathe and breed. So if at a very pragmatic level, it means that if we really want to prolong life, one of the secret lies in breathing and the second lies in breeding. So sometimes we feel very worried that there are people who are breeding very fast, and we start worrying about demographics. Don't worry, they are hurtling toward death, because this is how in ancient times brahmacharya was basically one of the ingredients. Of course, brahmacharya is not only about mastering death, but look at the story of Bhishma. How Bhishma could reach a point where he could have the Ikshamrityu, simply because he was one of those who had practiced brahmacharya to its utmost limits. And I remember one very interesting. Bhishma lived to 170 years, but I remember about my own maternal uncle. He was, his wife died after 1 year, and then he used to play football, even smoke, but later on he gave that up. He was very healthy. 90, he must have left his body in 95. Very healthy till 90. And I asked him, Mama ji, आपके पास इतना क्षमता कैसे, इतना, how do you have so much strength inside you? He said, beta, it is all because of brahmacharya. He could take a rod and literally bend it. That was his, iron rod, sorry, not plastic. So this was the strength inside his limbs, simply because, and he attributed it only to one thing, which was brahmacharya. He said, after your mommy died, I decided not to get married, and I spent my time this way. So even about the form, there are many secrets. Before we talk about, the immortality within, which is of course a fact, but the real stress, the real rub is ultimately, can the form really be immortalized? So I want to emphasize on this. See, that there is a soul within which is immortal is a question of discovery, and I'm sure that's people must be making effort to that discovery. But the truth is that the moment we discover the soul, come in contact with the psychic life, we discover immortal life. One of the things that happens when the psychic discovery is made, what Sampath Bhai was beautifully saying, that outwardly forms come and go, but deep inside there is something which remains immortal. And the moment we discover it, one of the things is we discover the secret sense of immortality. And it's not just an inner conviction. We actually discover some of our lives which we have lived. And we can also have a sense of a life which is going to come. In Savitri, there's a whole beautiful passage on that. A witness burning in the sanctuary, it knows the births which have gone by, and it knows the births which are going to come, simply because it contains the secret strings, half-finished passages, books, chapters, all that which are yet to be finished, flashes, glimpses. Of course, past life is not about, people see elaborate and everybody wants to see himself as somebody very great, but that's much of it is, subliminal messages and imaging. But we can have glimpses of a true life, moments which were lived in a very, very intense, beautiful way. So these are the elements of which go and get ingrained within our psychic life. Just maybe about a couple of hours back, we are taking a walk and somebody asked me about, have I ever been to Kashmir? And I remembered that those moments in Ladakh were one of the best moments of my life. Strangely. Why? Because that's a long story, but to cut it short, they were moments which have got integrated within my soul. They were the time when I read the synthesis. They were time when I was in wilderness. They were the moments when I could just be alone, because of various reasons. But the point is that if we really want to discover this immortal substance within us, then we get rid of the fear of death. This is the ultimate sure shot remedy. Because when we discover it, we know that this is not the first time we have been. There's a very interesting poem or a couplet by Maulana Rumi. He says the same thing, that, why should I be afraid of death? When I died a stone, I was born a plant, and when I died a plant, I was born an animal. When I died an animal, I was born a bird, and then a beast, and finally man. Why should I be afraid of death? And that's exactly what, if we take our tantric view of different forms, 84 lakh yonis. So there is a transition through forms, and who would be so foolish to really believe that, change of form is really death? It is nothing but a transition from one house to another, or from maybe one country to another. Surely there is a bit of pain and sorrow, because you are leaving behind those whom you loved and cared. But the interesting part is, and that's what is important to remember, we often say, oh, bichara chala gaya. Bichara nahi gaya. He is very happy. By the way, you are unhappy. And I give this example of when somebody is, as children, I'm sure most of us in India have experienced it. When you went for studies to a place far away from your village. So I used to go to Pune IFMC. So I would sit in the train, and parents, everybody has come, and mom has made all those puri sabji, and all the instructions, all tears and everything. What was my state? I was waiting for the train to start, honestly. And when the train started, they would weep. I'll get to know my mom is weeping 2 days. Please write a letter every week at least. So it was my, what could I do now? You don't get time. So I'll write for all the 4 weeks in 1 month, and I'll post it on set days. Everything is fine, because, you don't want them to suffer. But if you ask me, how was my life? I was happy. I was happy to have moved ahead. So we must understand that the man who has departed, or the being who has departed, the person who has departed, is actually going towards progress. This is one of the first fundamental things which we learn about rebirth. We have been told it's a question of reward and punishment, which makes life really gory. Because if it's about reward and punishment, then none of us has a chance. Imagine, in one lifetime, few good deeds and much selfishness. If you take the definition of bad deed, whatever way we look at it, nobody will have a hope. Ideally, we should keep going down, and earth would have gone to perdition. As children, people were told, if you hear somebody speaking, you'll become a chipkali in another birth. So wonder, my God, I'll become a chipkali. I'll become a lizard. No way. But this is how we were taught, that death and rebirth is a question of reward and punishment. But with Aurobindo, one of the best thing was its evolution, and it takes away the entire sting of death. It's progress. It's going from lower class to higher class. Who would not want it? Anybody who wants progress. And that is the secret reason of death. If you really look at it in a certain form, we can progress only up to a while. See, when we are a child, we are very supple and plastic. Everything is a wonder. Everything we want to learn. So we grow very fast. All children have adults, as I want to wear the shoes which Papa can wear or Mama can wear, and I want to be able to see the movies that they can see. I want to be able to go to the places they can go. Now, when you are grown up, you realize it was not worth it. And worst is, the books and the education make us lose all the wonder about life, because we seem to have every answer from every book. When we lose this wonder about life, we begin to decline. Actually, it has been documented that from the age of 30 onwards, our neurons begin to shrink. They begin to degenerate. Whereas modern studies show that there is an element of neuroplasticity. If we remain active, if our brain loves to learn new things, you can go on for a long time. The same is true of the body, perhaps. If brain can, why can't the heart? Why can't the rest of the body? So one of the problems of death, key progress, is that we cannot progress indefinitely in a certain form. Why? Because it gets fixed. Form by its nature means limits. So nature does very good cementing work. It builds a form which is not easy to, break down. And there's a purpose behind it. Otherwise, if forms are very loose, like gods have very plastic forms. So that is a problem with them. They can change from one form to another very readily. That's how you see Dharmaraja becomes a yaksha and a human being and talks. But man cannot do it. So the form is too rigid, and this rigidity, as we have seen, was required to individualize, which was important. Why? Because unlike the gods, we are meant to become individual centers of the divine, which is something very interesting. But within a form, the progress is only limited. So beyond a point, what happens? The form disintegrates. So sometimes paradoxically, if the growth is tremendous in one lifetime, that's why perhaps the idea is that they whom God loves too much, they come back fast. Now, I'm not saying that to judge life like that is any oversimplistic adage. One has to look at it, but there's some truth in it. Look at Swami Vivekananda, look at Sri Ramakrishna Paramahans, many of these yogis. Somebody asked me, oh, Aurobindo left his body at the age of 78. I said, it's so surprising given all that vastness and infinity he had crowded in his head and heart. I'm talking just of the form. I'm not right now, speaking about the avatar and the divine consciousness. If you really look at it, how his form could really bear the impact of all this. It's not easy, because this form has to support everything on earth. The form has to support. There's a line in Savitri, when Savitri is born, the fragile earthly vase. It's a vase. So there has to be a harmony between inner progress and the outer form. So what the outer form does, it doesn't allow us to progress very fast. Looks like a bad plan, but in God's wisdom, there is nothing like a bad plan. Otherwise, what would have happened? We entered a form and our soul remembers who we are. So what would happen? From childhood, you will start, Mama, you're not my mama. Papa, you're not my mama, Papa. And within few years, he's a Bairagi. This is not what God wants. Earthly life will remain what it is. So he wants the earthly life to change. So for that reason, there seems to be a struggle. Why? Because the form will not release consciousness from within so easily. Very often people say, why is it also difficult to find the soul? Well, precisely for this reason. If it was very easy, then like Sanat Kumar and Sanat Nandan, we would have just said, we are not interested in creation, we turn away and go away. But this is the challenge, to adapt the form to the new consciousness, and for the new consciousness to adapt to the form. And therein lies the real secret of immortality of the form. So slowly as we develop, so the form has to adapt to all the new things that are crowding inside us. We cannot imagine the impact, this inrush of information, experience of life have on the form. Because after all, it's through the form that all the transactions are taking place, whether it be the brain, the heart, or every other system. And slowly it adapts, it grows. And as it grows, it allows more consciousness to be released over a period of time. So this is where the secret of immortality lies. That we have to find a way that we can grow infinitely, and yet the form can progress simultaneously. Till it is found, death will be there. Why? Because the need for infinity is there. Need for infinite experience is there. It's part of, we are programmed for that. That's why people get glued to television. Even the old people who curse their children, you are spending so much time on phone and television. Just tell them, don't discuss, argue with them. Just tell them, Papa, ye wala channel dekh lo. You see how they get glued on the phone or this thing. Why? Because there are new things which are constantly impinging. And there is this sense within human beings to experience life differently in a wide variety. Life is like that. So as a result, the only other way one can do it is by disintegration of the form and taking a new life, new form. So it's an evolutionary process. When we understand it's an evolutionary process, there is nothing to feel afraid. It is a process of life and not something which opposes life. Let me read a few lines from Savitri. So this is Aurobindo describes about death. All here is a mystery of contraries. Darkness, a magic of self-hidden light. Light is hidden inside the form, and that is being released. And when we understand it, we understand the great sense and purpose of creation. It is not like, this world is full of death, suffering. What all we have made, reward, punishment, come out of this cycle, such a Nirashavadi, Hatash philosophy. This is not India. India is about facing the challenge of life, facing the challenge of death. I mean, I feel so happy that there were beings who could say that we die when we want to die. There's a story, even in the Western context, of Queen Elizabeth. When she is, on the deathbed, and there are farmers who have come outside and they want some bread, they are protesting for it. And the ministers don't want the Queen to know it. And the Queen says, I must attend to them. So when she gets up, they say, all the people around say, but you may die. She says, but death can wait. Look at the power of those words, but death can wait. These people cannot wait. So Sri Aurobindo reminds us that there is something in us which finally makes a choice. That choice is always with the psychic being. The soul within takes the last call. No death can come near. But because we are so identified with the form, so identified with life on the surface, that anything happens on the surface and we get a jhatka. And we immediately start, Are, mar jate to acha tha. These thoughts are very dangerous. I do believe that many autoimmune diseases, etc. Of course, please don't ask me references. No, this thing to prove it. But one day we'll discover that many of the illnesses that begin to sprout in people are because subconsciously this death wish is gone. There are constantly these two forces acting upon us. We should wish for life eternal, life immortal, life divine, life beautiful, not wish for death and dying. That's not what we are here for. And yet, till we discover the secret, death is a passage, and we should not be worried about it, because we know that it doesn't exist. We are only changing houses. And just like the school boy or the college boy who is going away is happy, looking forward to what's out there. But it's a suffering for those who are left behind, because again, suffering is why. Why is there suffering? It's because we are attached. We are attached in a way that, this is mine. That brings suffering. If you really look at it very simply, not that it's easy to get detached, but well, that's the fact. And why does that come? Because we live largely a sensory life. So the person is only the form. I know so many persons who, after they so-called died, they came in contact with those who were behind, even solaced them, even said we are in a beautiful space. And of course, people do all kinds of things. Sometimes they keep on the person in the memory and they start getting spirit communication for years. This is very dangerous, because most likely the person has gone away. After death, one cannot continue ad infinitum on these planes. There is a constant push to go beyond. So if after 5 years somebody says, my papa or my brother comes to me, be sure that it is his sheath which has been taken up by some vital force. And it's enjoying, it's a game it's playing. Why? Because in the mind, who is the form maker? The mind is the form maker. Mind has created a form of a person. That's why it's called a persona. And that sheath, while it was left, and we wanted it, so we were strengthening it, some beings from the other worlds takes hold of that sheath. And it's not a good thing to be in communication with, all these beings, because the soul is departed. So best way when people are departing or departed says that you are going forward in your journey. Be happy. Send them love, not grief. That's the worst way to send away people. Send them love. What is there to feel unhappy about? The person is going to take up a new body, probably in some new place. Of course, new place, not probably. And hopefully not in the same family. It would be so boring. Dadaji aage, all these fantastic stories. Are, they are not innovative. Why should Dadaji come back again as your, not that it doesn't happen, but there'll be such a boring life to come back into the same family, in the same environment. Why not gone from India, born in Spain, France, US, Italy, finally says, nahin, India hi tha sab kuch. Then you come back, you are rich with experience and you realize this is life. Much better than being born in the same family, yet we want these things to happen. So we start even seeing such things. Let the dead be free. Let the departed be free, but not free too soon. That's the other part of it. So there is a period during when the physical death is taken place, so-called physical death. What is it? The soul is withdrawing from the body, and there are many knots, nuts, bolts. As per the Upanishad, there are 101 nuts and bolts. through which it is tied. The being is tied, and sometimes very tight. If we are very attached, they are very tight. And when you know what happens when you open something which is very tight, there is a lot of stress. So if we are very attached, there is a lot of pain during death. Because with all the 101 strings we have tied ourselves. So there is, while dying, one is thinking of, I'm using the word death in dying in this sense that there is no death, as I said. But while the being is getting detached from the form, Are mera pota nati, they will just make you a photo frame. Search for your hidden will. That's it. And if the will is, contrary to expectation, they will fight. Let the fellow be free. But the more we are attached, the more pain we experience during death. But supposing we have learned to be detached, Mother says something very beautifully. She says, people say life is so difficult, we want to die, we want to die. I tell them, die then, die to the ego. Die to the ego. Why be so attached to this name, form, personality, outer? And if we live life like that, that's how the Jivan Mukta lives. That's how, Arjuna was asked by Shri Krishna to live. That's how Bhishma lived. That's how we see Baji Prabhu, which immortalized in Aurobindo, he lived. That's how the great warrior Shivaji lived. That's how the great ones live. That they are doing everything in this world, but they are completely inwardly detached. Now, when they die, it's not a cause of pain. They simply say Tata bye bye. And if they could, when we are crying, they would say, Rota kyun hai bhai? I am going to a better place. First of all, after death, where does one go? One transits through these different worlds. Of these, the vital is the first. And that is a painful world sometimes. Because if we are very attached to certain pravritis and tendencies, the passage can be very painful. The mother for 1 year was making a passage. This is in 1904, 1905. Through this vital world, because he saw people suffer. So she said, anybody with a little faith in the divine can go through that passage. It's like a hyper tunnel. What is that called now? Trains running from Mumbai to Delhi in 2 hours. Hypersonic tunnel. So she created in the occult worlds. Probably in the physical world, we are trying to manifest these things. So one could just enter that passage and go smoothly. Otherwise, the moment body is not there, people don't realize what a protection body is. They want to die, not realizing that in body you can reach out. When one dies in the vital world, you just are torn by forces unless one is individualized. Otherwise, one is torn by forces, and forces depending upon our affinities. So if we have lived our life full of, fear and lust and greed, then all these forces come to us, come with us, come with us. There's no heaven and hell, but a natural gravitation or natural, upliftment depending on how we have lived our life. So to prepare for death is to weigh the way we live our life. It's not like a last moment preparation. Somebody asked Aurobindo, what about that shloka? कि जब मौत की घड़ी सामने आई तो बेटे नारायण की थी रट लगाई, तुरंत खुल गए उसके वैकुंठ द्वारे, हरे कृष्ण गोविंद हरे मुरारी. He said, why? What about, the Gita says this shloka, if you die while remembering me, you will come straight to me. Aurobindo said that has to be seen in conjunction with the other one where he says, remember me at all times and fight. Then when consciousness is like that, when we live as a free being, who is afraid of death? Because one knows it doesn't exist. So after death, we go through these worlds, vital worlds. There are beings who greet us, meet and greet. We can't stay long because that sheath also soul wants to discard. Why? Because it knows it's going to take a lovely bath. Kevade ka gulab ka jal. So it wants to shed even the vital sheath. Sheds the vital sheath. All Shraddha and all is for that vital sheath. Then it enters the mental worlds, where depending on its thoughts, it will go to those beautiful worlds, or if the thoughts have been very dark and unhealthy, then goes into that darker worlds. And then finally, where does it go? It goes into the psychic world. So beautifully a poet has written, Mujhe bekhudi ki tune badi chashni chatai. What happens there? God is waiting with his arms to take us in his arms. What is there to feel bad about it? At least in India, I have not understood why people grieve over death. We believe in rebirth. So it's a progress. And we do believe that, God is there. So in life, this is his workplace, that is his home. So why we are so worried about going from the workplace to the home, where a divine mother is waiting? Come, my child. All that we should be worried about when we go there. Would we hang our head in shame and say, Mom, so sorry, I just deviated all that you gave me towards my own selfish ends? Or we can say with our head held high, touching the feet of the world mother, Ma, thank you for giving me the strength and the wisdom to live out the purpose for which I was born. May I be born 1,000 times, 10,000 times to fulfill your will in the world. So then that is the, attitude we develop, because when we discover the soul, death loses its reality. All this fear of death is still we don't know this. This is the giant ignorance. Till we see that, rebirth, birth, death, all this is a question of pain. Pain is there, suffering is there, but we are here to snatch delight from the jaws of pain, to snatch life from the jaws of death. This is what we are here for. That makes life interesting. So he reminds us, all here is a mystery of contraries, darkness, a magic of self-hidden light, suffering, some secret raptures, tragic mask, and death, an instrument of perpetual life. That's what we are seeing. There is no death actually. It's only an instrument of life. It's a cellar in the house of life. You go through a phase when you're a little dark. It's like sleep. What is sleep? Our life is but a sleep and a forgetting. This is Shakespeare, not Savitri. A life is but a sleep and a forgetting. So this existence is teeming with life. Only we don't experience it because the narrower we are, our experience of life is so limited. I sometimes ask my students when they come, not now, but earlier when, I used to teach in Air Force days. So I would tell them, okay, tell me what trees you saw on the way. Sir, trees. So I tell them, okay, from the gate till my room, how many trees and what trees? Sir, I don't remember. So I said, then that's the state. We are so lost within our little self. All the time we are thinking about only our little personality. So we are afraid of death. Because this personality, this name, form, naam gum jayega, chehra ye badal jayega. Yes, of course. Name and form are meant for that. Until one day, and that we'll talk about very shortly. Suffering from some secret raptures, tragic mask, and death an instrument of perpetual life. When we take away this mask, we see the same Krishna, who was on the battlefield of Kurukshetra as Kali, suddenly appears to us as the friend and lover of mankind. Although death walks beside us on life's road, a dim bystander at the body's start, and a last judgment on man's futile works. It looks like that. But we are here to create immortality out of transient things. Classic example is Vyas. He continues to live. Ramayana, Valmiki continues to live, and many others. And of course, not to speak of Aurobindo, Savitri, till eternity, it will continue to live. This is what we are here for, to build immortality with transient things. Other is the riddle of its ambiguous face. Whose ambiguous face? Death. Death is a stair, a door, a stumbling stride the soul must take to cross from birth to birth. A great defeat pregnant with victory. A whip to lash us towards a deathless state. That's why this is true even of our ordinary life. And those who are immortals, Mother, Aurobindo, when people say they departed, I just don't understand this language. When Nalnida has that experience of the Divine Mother in the new body, she says, I'm here just like previously. Very much the same. The human, the divine, you can connect with me just as you used to connect earlier. So this is so true because in at least myself, with these physical eyes, I had not seen the Divine Mother or Aurobindo in this life. And when I came, so people who had been here, lived for, decade, they would say, when the mother was there, when she was. So I had to once say, sir, it pains. What pains? Was means what? It doesn't exist. No, I mean, in the physical body, I said, but she is absolutely the same. You can connect, in fact, in a way, much better way. because you no more, are only hooked on to the physical appearance. This is what mother said. You think I am this? She pinches the body. You think I am in this? At one time she says, I have left the body long, long back. Even Aurobindo speaks of it. I am very much on the other side. She speaks of this 1960s after the 62 experience. But that's a whole saga of, discovering immortality for the body. And I don't want to get into this. A whip to lashes towards a deathless state. What does death do? It is like the competitor of life. Come, let's see, let's see. And man, we became, oh, death is the victor. Already we have declared him the victor. So he becomes the victor. We should say, no, we take the challenge. You see, that is the beauty of science in certain sense. Science takes the challenge and says, we'll discover how the body can be immortal. If to this tendency of the science who doesn't believe in the absoluteness of death, we can add the spiritual truth. Like the Russian gymnasts, when they did the gymnastics, mother said, oh, this is wonderful. But if only they could add in it the touch of spiritual consciousness, it will be really divine. So if to this idea that yes, we can discover the secret of immortality, even if the body, we can add this deep spiritual truth that yes, we are indeed immortal. All that we need to do is to fuse this immortal substance with the body, find a way and means, bridges, and then things will begin to change. And even before we do that, the soul grows through all these experiences till it becomes a wholly individualized, we're talking about individuality, individualized psychic being, where it can pick and choose the parents, pick and choose the place of birth. Why? Because it has taken these experiences and now develops a full-fledged psychic personality. It's not just a little tiny spark of soul. It has become a fire, and this fire consciously chooses. So just imagine, even within this, there is such a range. And how does it happen when we pass through the doors of death? So every time we meet a challenge, instead of immediately saying, Maya, illusion, let's go into some other world. I don't know why are we in haste to cut the knot of creation. Rather, we should say, let's make it better. Let's make it better. Lok Sangrahart. How does it matter? 1 life, 2 lives, 100 lives. The purpose is to make this world more beautiful, more divine, more true. And if you look at life like that, then it's wonderful. Every challenge is an opportunity. In fact, life without challenge would be, so dull and boring. Somebody said all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. So that we can put reverse also. All comfort and no challenges make Jack and Jill and everybody else a very dull boy, because everything is provided. So let's take the challenge of life. It is a whip to lash us towards a deathless state. It comes to remind us you are immortal. It doesn't come to tell us that you are mortal. It comes to tell us, bring out that immortal thing. That's why, because we are harassed by brief life, we want to immortalize a moment's work. The inconscient world is the spirit's self-made room, eternal night, shadow of eternal day. So ultimately, death is nothing else but the shadow of the infinite light. And why he has created this shadow? So that within it, the seeds of light he has put, like in the soil, you put seeds of light. And then the shadow holds it tightly. After that, it releases the light, just like our earth. Why do we not just throw the seeds? They will not grow, they will burn away. So when it is buried deep inside this soil, and the soil should not be very soft nor very hard. So first they take roots. So we have taken roots upon earth, and then slowly it develops into a full-fledged tree. That is the purpose of life. So night is not our beginning nor our end. She is the dark mother in whose womb we have hid, safe from too swift awaking to world pain. We came to her from a supernal light. By light we live, and to the light we go. So this is what we have to remember, that we are Amritasya Putra, Anandasya Putra. Remind ourselves every day that death does not exist. It is a temporary, it is transient. Let's reverse it. People say that death is the fact. We should say death is the transient mystery. But one day it will be conquered by life eternal and life immortal. Why? Because that within us, which is immortal, draws its breath from the eternal, the imperishable substance that comes from the supreme divine. And all this play ultimately will have to give way to this pressure of immortality from within. That's why over a period of time, we see that mankind has been fascinated with immortality. And there are countless stories, paucity of time, I'm not going into it, from Sagar Manthan, which gives so many hints. Gilgamesh, his tablet has been recently found, who was trying for immortality, to Prahlad's story. All these stories where we try to create immortality only by outer means, it doesn't succeed. The secret of immortality is within. But this secret is not only so that we discover it and feel very happy. This secret is that when we discover the nectar of immortality, we must let it flow into our thoughts, our feelings, our heart, our mind, even our senses. Even the senses under the influence of the soul substance must automatically start tuning to higher things and not gravitate towards lower things. Sign of refinement is that. See, people who are refined in their soul, developed in their soul, like refined music, refined taste, refined color. Whereas those who are still very dense, very little soul development, you can know it by the taste of the music they want to hear, by the kind of conversation they love to engage in. So this is how let this substance flow into our soul, into our mind and life and body, in breath and speech and act, and eventually into the very body self. And as we do it, as this substance gets linked to what Aurobindo has talked about, the supramental substance. Why? Because supramental substance is infinite. Below it, always there are some limits. But this substance can respond to the touch of the infinite, exactly as it should respond. There is no diminution, there is no diminishing. Right now, as it is said, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. So many things that our spirit wants, but the body doesn't respond. But in the supramental world, what the spirit sees, that it creates. There is no disparity. So as this substance, the linking point is with the psychic being within us. As this substance, the psychic being becomes the bridge between the supramental world where matter, there is supramental substance, supramental matter, which responds perfectly to the cry and the call and the pressure of the spirit. As this substance starts getting more and more integrated into the very physical body, very soon, even few hundred years is nothing, billion years, out of man will grow a being for whom even the body will taste immortality. There will be an immortal body with an immortal substance, because it will be completely connected with the supramental consciousness, whose nature is a perfect response to the call of the spirit. That means that there will be no need to change. Also, it will contain many things: luminosity, plasticity. Right now, the form becomes rigid, so it stops growing. But it will become luminous, plastic. It will be automatically immune to diseases. You won't need vaccines, thank God. It will be automatically immune. Why? Because this substance will be conscious substance. Right now, this substance is not conscious. That's why all kinds of diseases can enter without our recognizing it. We know it only when the doctor tells us or we have symptoms. But the supramental substance is conscious. It knows what is to be repelled automatically. So this is the solution that Aurobindo has not only proposed, it is being worked out in creation. And there are those who are already on the way toward this new creation, where not only the soul's immortality is a very old story, but the first step, but who are also on the way of immortality of the very body. I'll stop here, and if there are questions, I would like to take. Namaste.
Thank you so much, Dr. Alok Pandey, for very beautifully discussing about life, death, consciousness, past life, Jivan Mukti, and many more topics. Now, I request all the participants to ask if there are any questions, or they can put it on the chat and I can take their questions.
Excuse me, I have a question.
Yes, Navneet, please go ahead.
Namaste, Alok.
Namaste, namaste.
You mentioned that once the body leaves, the soul leaves the body, the different parts of body get merged into the concerned domains or concerned regions like mind into mental domain and so on. When the psychic takes birth again, psychic has its some memory of the past through which it decides what kind of life to take, and it works out in the new life.
Yes.
Now, since mind has been merged with the mental domain, vital has merged with the vital domain or vital space, whatever it is called, how does one get
Yeah.
the subconscious mind
Yeah.
into the new body when
Yeah.
the psychic takes birth? Because subconscious mind, as you know, is the memory of the past lives.
Yes. Yes.
That's
So
my question.
yeah, a very good question, and it's worth spending a few minutes on this. So basically, what happens is psychic is often described as the Hansa, the swan. So what does the swan does? It extracts milk from the water, as it is said, Neer Shir Vivek. Now, I'm not discussing whether it is actually happens or not, but the point is that what does the psychic do? It takes away the essence of an experience. I can give an example that, when we are going through a difficult moment in life, let's take a common experience. Say youngsters going through either a failure in examination or through a heartbreak. Now, during that moment, it is all terrible. What happens after 20 years? They laugh over it. When their child says, Papa, I am going through a heartbreak, Are kuch nahi hai, it'll be okay, you'll be fine. Papa is so difficult, failure. Maybe aisa tha. So what happens? The essence of the experience gets integrated with the psychic. The details are left behind. So the mental memory of the details which we carry right now, the mental memories are lost, but the essence is carried. Now, what happens with this essence? When in next life we come, let us take that we went through a challenge of failure and we navigated through it very well. Even though we didn't succeed, but we took the challenge and faced it. So when next life we come, we don't have to take that challenge. Doors of success are open because that education is over. As Aurobindo says, even if the one maintains the full passage is fate is a transaction done at every moment between the soul and nature with God as the forcing arbiter. Even if the one maintains the unseen decree, he writes thy refusal in thy credit page. For doom is not a close, a mystic seal, arisen from the tragic crash of life. The spirit rises mightier with each defeat. It gods like wings grow wide with every fall. So you see, a life which has been faced beautifully, lived beautifully, taking the challenge. Doesn't matter whether we succeed or not, but we have taken the challenge. Then that gets integrated into the soul as a soul memory. So there are outer memories which are, as you said rightly about, lot of details about the mind and all that goes away. It's not needed anymore. But the essence, like a schooling, when we went through the school, we learned physics and chemistry and biology. What do we remember? I mean, most people would forget about it, but what it had done is it has led the mind and the brain to expand. So studies have helped the brain to form complex synaptic connections. So same thing happens with a life's memories, that the details are completely lost, but the essence is carried forward. And that's what comes handy in the next life, which is not, as I said, a system of reward and punishment, but an evolutionary progress. So it is like in one life, we went through kindergarten, first, second. Next life, we come in class 3. Or if we failed in class first time, every possibility is there. Then we come back to class 1, but with a little grace mark. Ye bacche ko nikal do. So we go to class 2. So it is like that in the whole process. Some souls advance fast, some go slow. It's a question of choice. It's not like it's bad or good, nothing like that. Some like to go through one class several times. Some like to, advance fast. It's a question of destiny. But the essence remains, and that's what is carried forward. And the unfinished curves, as I said, there is an experience which we didn't. That's why suicide is so harmful. Not only because we get projected into the dark, sunless worlds, as the Isha Upanishad puts it, Surya Nam Te Loka Prityabi Gachanti, because we are going in that state of depression and darkness, so we get projected into the dark worlds. But also because a person who commits suicide, he leaves something undone and unfinished. There was a challenge which he refuses to face. That challenge could be just a state of inner depression. or it could be something outside. And because he has not faced the challenge, he comes back, nature gives it the same challenge, but under more difficult circumstances. Because that's the only way it will compress till finally something within emerges. So this is the process of rebirth, where a challenge which is negotiated, success and failure are human terms. Life was never meant for that. But the fact that one took the challenge and navigated through it, that's the only thing that will remain in memory. The rest all will be wiped away. And of course, some beautiful psychic moments. And rebirth again, mother describes that, a person who has lived like a empress in previous life, but realizes that being an empress is really a very difficult thing, because you really can't do a lot of things that you want to do. So you are born as an ordinary common folk. So that's how it takes place. The essence remains, the details are lost. And that's a grace and a blessing. Just imagine remembering in next life all the things of this life, how difficult it is going to be. So it's a grace that death makes us forget most of these things. Mental sheath is dissolved. With all the impressions on the mind, they get dissolved. But the psychic essence which was gathered through that will remain. Yes.
That is true, Bhaiya. My question is, how does one get the details in the subconscious? Because in the new birth, in every birth, we have some past habits. We are not able to change our habits so easily.
Yeah.
And certain events from the past, keep troubling us at times. So essence, this is not essence, this is the detail of certain things.
Well, this
How
is
do
one
they
of
come
the
into
theories
new
of
birth?
past life regression. I'm not sure whether the habits and details, some things can come of an intense experience of life, it can come. Like, if one has been guillotined or burnt, that can go, and, a fear of fire, it can remain. But I know the past life regression, they say that, certain habits of the past, which is very, very unlikely. Habits are very mechanical bonds created by physical nature. And whether they will really remain in the next life is a very, we may presume it, but there is no real evidence to indicate it. So in any case, one thing is for sure, that if we discover the soul, we discover the past life. And we can discover the way, the essence of a past life. With that, we can connect certain tendencies. Perhaps, for instance, if one had in the past life a very warrior nature, where, one could, kill with impunity. It was part of a war and battlefield. Then something of that warrior nature can come. Now we can use the word, it's a habit and tendency, but this tendency has come to get refined and purified. That's how Aurobindo describes in Ilion, that Achilles, who is a warrior nature, begins to change toward the end, and he becomes a little compassionate. So if that habit has come into this life, we don't have to worry about its source. What we have to take it, that in this life, whatever is there should be purified and refined. So it doesn't really matter. We don't have to go into where it came from. It is there right now. How I can purify it, how I can refine it. So that should be the focus. Focus is always toward the future. So it doesn't matter where it has come from. Whether it comes from the past or it's just a mechanical tendency, because we have taken a human birth. Many things come from environment, many things by heredity. Many things because of the physical constitution. All this can happen. It's not necessarily coming from a past life. I understand that, some people explain that when we are born with certain tendencies, it's because in the past we were like this. It may or may not. What comes from the past is a certain tendency. For instance, as I said, warrior nature. So it may manifest itself in childhood as, love for bow and arrow, love to take fights and challenges. But the actual details, it's very unlikely it'll come like that. Yeah, it can come as an attraction towards, like we used to do in childhood in ancient time, that you were shown dawat and kalam, or a knife and dagger, or money, and children, when they picked up, it showed their tendency. So to that extent, a tendency can come, but very unlikely that a habit will come back unless some part completely which has not been worked upon, an unfinished curve of evolution, that can come. Let's say somebody had a very lusty vital. So it can, it's not like that tendency has come from the subconscious mind. The soul has not gone through that experience. It has not taken that challenge. It is an unfinished learning curve. So when one takes a new body, that unfinished learning, that challenge will come again. So it's not like it was there in the subconscious mind from where it has come. It is a challenge it didn't take. It refused to take the challenge, or took the challenge and didn't succeed. So in the next life, one may have a vital with this tendency till one has taken the challenge. So ultimately the essence will be the same, that move towards conquest, self-mastery, refinement. With each life, the process is the same. If we have not taken the challenge in one life, it will be more difficult. If we have taken the challenge, whatever effort we have put in will go into the sum total of effort. But there is nothing like a subconscious mind coming and entering into the soul. But what can happen with those who are extremely developed there, but that applies to people like Swami Vivekananda, that they had a very developed mental sheath and a vital sheath. So it may remain in that realm for a long time. It is not subject to dissolution. And when they come back, they may take elements of it from universal nature, but that's not common. For most of humanity, all this gets dissolved, average. But some can bring that together, like Beethoven's hands, they became immortal. So something like that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Alok Pandey.
Yeah.
So we will take one last question by Renuka. Renuka, if you can just unmute yourself and ask the question. I can read the question. So the question is, when person takes next birth, the psychic essence which is formed becomes swabhava of person in the next birth. So this is the question.
Yes, and this swabhava, and I would add swadharma, is along a hierarchical progression. So that's why in the Indian thought it was like, Shudratva, when we are more attached to physical world and the environment. Then one graduated into Vaishya Bhav, where one has finished this and goes on to the next level. Then there is the Kshatriya Bhav, the Swabhav and Sudharma of a Kshatriya. And then there is the Brahmanatva, and then there is the spiritual consciousness. So subtly, depending on where we left, we go on to the next. So that's why the evolutionary hierarchy was created. That the beginnings of life start with this physical world. After all, who is a Shudra? For whom the physical world is real and not really the other realm. But who is the Vaishya? Where the vital has begun to take shape and it wants to expand into other things. And in Kshatriya, this vital expands to a point where he loves conquest and victories and challenges. And in the Brahmin, where the mind has become active and starts turning upward towards a greater truth. So this is described very beautifully in Aurobindo Savitri, Book 1, Canto 4, The Secret Knowledge. Toward the end, please read it. It's marvelous. This is the sailor on the flow of time. So where it describes that we are like sailors, and in one life, we initially want to be near the shore. Then we go a little more further, but from one shore, we pick up things and sell it on the other shore. Then we want to take the challenge. We travel wider into the sea. Then our eyes turn upwards toward the sky because we want to go beyond the limits of the sea. So this is how the Swabhava and Swadharma, as rightly you have said, that begins to grow and evolve with each particular life. So like if Arjuna has to come again, he may not be, he may be more like a Buddha. I'm just giving an example. So he will be a warrior, but warrior of another nature, where he will battle against the inner tendencies. This we see even in our outer life. Initially, gladiators, that was the way people used to have sports. Then it has changed into, then there was war. Now it has become changed into Olympics. War is replaced by Indo-Pak cricket match. Hopefully that should be the end of things. Then it turns within, that we have the tendencies inside and to, wage war against it. So the tendency of a Kshatriya begins to change towards something higher and higher. This is just an example. Brahmanatva first involved only with outer knowledge, then comes inner, then comes into the inmost and higher. So this is how the soul advances from life to life, from one Swabhava and Swadharma to another.
Once again, thank you so much, Dr. Alok Pandey, for your time. It was an honor to have you. We know you're busy. If your time permits, then you can stay back, or we leave it upon you as you feel comfortable, sir.
Yes, after some time, I'll just connect and just be there. After some time, yeah.
Sure, sir. Sure.
Thank
We will
you
now.
So much.
Yeah, please. Yes, sir. Okay. We will now begin with the panel discussion. I'd like to introduce our first panelist, Dr. Joysen Ji. Professor Joysenji is a professor and former head in the Department of Architecture and Regional Planning, Indian Institute of Technology, Kharagpur. He is currently the chairman, Nehru Museum of Science and Technology, and co-professor in charge, Academy of Classical and Folk Arts, Kharagpur. His areas of research include community and regional planning and Indian cultural heritage documentation. He is currently associated with the two mega projects sponsored by MHRD Government of India, that is the Sandhi, Science and Heritage Mega Initiative, and also PI2 in the Future of Cities. He has been associated with Asia Pacific Network of Housing Research Hong Kong as associate member, reviewer of editorial board junior of architecture, and with CSVTU Research Journal as associate editor. He has authored 7 books on Indian heritage, iconographic documentation, and a textbook on sustainable planning in India by TERI, Indian Habitat Center, Delhi. He is a prime collaborator on projects with GSAAP EV League, Columbia University, New York City, USA, and MIT, Cambridge, and the mobilizer of narratives, in situ activities, and outreach exploration on Indian knowledge systems at IIT Kharagpur. I welcome you, Professor Joysenji, to the panel discussion. I would now like to introduce our second panelist, Dr. Vladimir Yatsenko ji. Dr. Vladimir Yatsenko ji is the Director of Research at the Institute of Applied Research in Integral Studies, La Grace Shi Aurobindo Integral Life Center. Vladimir ji holds a master's degree in General and Theoretical Linguistics and Sanskrit Language and Literature from St. Petersburg State University and a PhD in Indian Philosophy from MS University of Baroda. His doctorate thesis was the Vedic vision and the concept of Agni in the Rig Veda in the light of Sri Aurobindo. Vladimir ji is a scholar and instructor of Sanskrit and Sanskrit literature and an educator in Vedic and Vedantic studies. He is aligned with various education institutions across the world, including the Indian Psychology Institute, International Center in Integral Studies, Oro University, Surat, Arogya Center, New Mexico, and many others. I welcome you, Dr. Vladimir ji, to the panel discussion. Now, I'd like to introduce our moderator for the evening, Professor Malaka Padiachi. Professor Malaka Padiachi is a Director of Wellness Practice and Resident Mentor at Rashtram. She has a master's and doctorate in psychology and literature. She is a writer, international speaker, and executive coach integrating yoga and Ayurveda. She precisely served as adjunct professor of the SPJN School of Global Management on the campuses of Dubai, Singapore, Sydney, and Mumbai. Researcher in the area of holistic well-being and integrated intelligence for more than 30 years, she is also the author of several books like Hard Skills, Emotional Intelligence for Work and Life. She has been a pioneer teacher of emotional intelligence to MBA students in management institutions in Asia. Her doctoral thesis on Gujarati literature integrates knowledge of psychology analysis, creating an integrative approach. Consultant of different multinational organizations, advises with a model of sustainability of performance and holistic leadership. Her knowledge about well-being, Ayurveda, yoga, leadership, and emotional intelligence makes her a unique advisor for our open training programs. I welcome you, Professor Malaka Padiachi, to take over the panel discussion.
Dhanyavad Satyajit and Swagatam Vladimir and Professor Joyda. I would not call you Dr. Joyce and I'll call you Joyda. And Namaskar Sampatji, Alokji. It has been a wonderful evening till now listening to Alokji on death, dying and beyond. He integrated Sri Aurobindo, Savitri, the mother's perspectives, and also his own knowledge of neuroscience and what really the body and life and death is all about. The mother has spoken extensively about death, the reason for death and its relationship to what we term life and to other states of consciousness was central to her explorations in transforming the body. Through her extraordinary experiences, she not only provided glimpses of a new state of being, she also radically redefined the meaning of life, death, and immortality. The farewell, the Center for Farewell at Aurobindo, when I was reading about it, it actually makes one understand what the mother had in mind when she taught so much about death and why she gave so much importance to death. It's wonderful when you read, and you can actually, though I've never physically met her, but you actually can listen and feel her presence in front of you when you read her words. Death is not the opposite of life. At the moment I understood, and I never forgot, death is not the opposite of life. It is not the opposite of life. It's a sort of change in the cells functioning or in their organization. Mother's Agenda 16.3.63. I have reached the conclusion that there is really no such thing as death. There is only an appearance, and an appearance based on a limited outlook. But there is no radical change in the vibration of consciousness. So maybe I would love to begin this panel discussion by sharing the mother's thoughts on death and death as transformation. Vladimir, what are your thoughts on how mother calls it just a radical change in the vibration of consciousness? So maybe 5 to 7 minutes, and then maybe some choices, so we'll have more discussions.
Well, in the Mother's Agenda, we have the whole description. The whole Mother Agenda is about Mother trying to figure out this riddle of death. And there are many interesting discussions and dialogues with Sat Prem about this topic. And as you rightly said, in other place she says that the death is just the transition from one room to another. You just go, like you leave this room and you go to another, and that transition is needed. Needed because evolutionary it is required. We are not yet in the body of that kind which would be flexible and plastic enough to respond to the spirit. So we inherited this body from the past, from our evolutionary past of the, of the animal nature. We look at us, we are still half animal, as Aurobindo says, half God, half beast, We got everything what we could from the evolutionary past, and now we are trying to evolve. This body becomes more and more flexible, more and more responsive to the spiritual forms of consciousness through our faculties, seeing, hearing, speaking, thinking, feeling. We are constantly evolving, growing in the spirit. The psychic being, the soul, is here working with these bodies within. It's the whole beautiful picture of evolution of consciousness. And of course, as Aurobindo says, we are a transitional. Man is a transitional being. It's not yet the being which arrived at its utmost. We are on the way to evolve to something which we are meant to be. So, as beautifully also Aurobindo says in Savitri, when the Lord of Death disputes this with Savitri, and Savitri, there is the whole debate of love and death. It's the whole canto, so beautifully describing. And so the Lord of Death tells her, but how would you even suppose to think in this way that you, this body, this formation would be immortal and would have kind of tea with the divine here, kind of you will be equal to the divine. He cannot imagine, that we would evolve to that extent. And she says, yes, you are right, but do you think that if man is now a child, that he would never grow? Is it meant that by you that we have to be constantly children only? So there is this the aspect of evolution which Aurobindo and the mother bring into this philosophy, which changes everything. And this transitional view on us, on our development and evolution of consciousness, is actually the answer to the riddle of death. Death is working still because it has its place. Otherwise, it would not be here. So, and it does its work. At the end, when the mother and death meet together, and this is so beautiful. In Sri Aurobindo Savitri, it's a bit different than it is in a Mahabharata story. In Mahabharata story, she convinces Yama, she gives him a very beautiful speeches about Dharma, and he is so thrilled that he gives her gifts one by one. But in Sri Aurobindo Savitri, he refuses at the end to give her the gifts, and he wants to fight. He says, okay, I see that you have the knowledge, yes, but do you have the power? Knowledge is okay. It's not by knowledge that this world is made, but by power. Do you have the power? And then she reveals that light, and his body was devoured, eaten by light. And then still at the end, Sri Aurobindo does very interesting. He says, she leaves him still, and she says, live still, death. Do still thy work. There is something else to be done. So it's a worker of some kind who is helping us to cleanse, to clear the path. And the whole word mrityu, mara, from root mri, and there are kindred roots like mrij, to cleanse. It's a cleansing device. It is something which is removing the part of our form which is not supposed to endure in time and supposed to change. It has to fall away from our path. Otherwise we would be, suffocating in that form which is not developing. So it is a totally different view on death, of course. And Mother and Sri Aurobindo unlocked for us this riddle, and now we could finally see the meaning in it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And it's so beautiful that we are able to understand life as life divine, life beautiful, in a much better way when we start understanding death. So death doesn't remain a negative construct. In fact, it helps us maybe live life better, because at another place, Mother also speaks of gradation of death. And where she says that there are people who are dead while being alive. And there are also many people who are alive after death. And for those who know that this material form can manifest a supramental light, well, those who don't have the supramental light in them are already a little dead. So Joyda, would you like to share your thoughts?
Yeah, I was absolutely mesmerized. First, pranam to all of you. And I was absolutely mesmerized by Vladimir's, it was almost like poetry, the way he was speaking, it's, which takes us beyond life, beyond death, that's the whole feeling which makes us deathless. And it takes us from life to a much higher life, So it's a feeling. I'll take it this way, and under the ambit of the universal, the great supreme philosophy of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother. I mean, they come as the two living epitomes of a modern India, and reflecting within a mirror the whole of the Sapta Rishis, as Sri Aurobindo says, the 7 rishis of the Angiras, the Angirashas. So what is this Angirasha? Anga is the body, body. And in the body, from the body, within the body, there is the Rasha, which is the vital, the prana, the vital, the pranamaya kosha. So that is the whole journey, and prana is Agni. So the body, which is the wood of the tree, has the fire within it. And when the fire comes out of the wood, the fire burns the body itself. That is the secret of creation. That is the secret of Angirasha. And when the fire burns, the heat goes up and it brings down the rain clouds, the soma, the nectar, the divine nectars of immortality. So this entire world is like a cycle of Agni and Soma, which is, and Agni gets condensed and it becomes a Surya, And then Sri Aurobindo says there's a Surya which is in the morning, which is Gayatri, and there is a Surya which is in the noon, which is Savitri, and there's a Surya which is in the dusk, which is Sandhya. What are these images? What are these images? We'll come to that a little later. But as Vladimir wonderfully said, the riddle of death. The riddle of death is actually to go beyond death. There's a wonderful saying by Tagore, Rabindranath, Gurudev Rabindranath. He says, Marana tuhu samu saman. Marana, which is death. I mean, you're my Krishna. Krishna is eternal death. It's dark consciousness. It's like the black hole of the universe. Everything is absorbed within it. All the universes are dissolving, getting dissolved. It's dying. It's going beyond. But then Tagore says, he writes wonderful songs. So, the vibrations of Sri Aurobindo are in the poetries of Tagore. There's a song, I won't say that in Bengali right now, but it goes like this, Ache dukkho ache mritu, which says there is a lot of sorrow and there is a lot of death, but tobuo shanti, tobuo ananda. But still there is peace, still there is a lot of bliss. Why? Why is it so? Because when you see the flowers which are dying in a garden and they're all falling down, they're replaced by the new flowers. When the waves in the sea are collapsing, the old waves, this is quantum physics. Schrodinger and Heisenberg talks about the sea, the wave mechanics, which is, physics and metaphysics, whether you look at it physically or metaphysically. So the old waves of the seas are also collapsing, but the old flowers, the old waves are replaced by the new flowers. Tagore says, Torongo milaya jai, Torongo ote. This is in Bengali, which means the old waves are collapsing, but the new waves are surging from the ocean, from the backdrop, the transcendental wave of consciousness. But the transcendental wave of consciousness is not complete by itself. That's supramental. It's complete by surging the waves again and again. So the complete picture is the transcendental backdrop plus the waves which is coming up. So one wave may collapse. If I am a wave, I collapse. But there are other waves in the sea which are surging, and they're waves of the future, waves 5,000 years later, waves 5 million years later. So there is not a moment in the universe when the universe is dying. Now that takes us to multiple universes. One Brahmand may be collapsing in a black hole, but in the stellar nursery, another Brahmand is surging. So when you look at the universe, it is absolutely a fantastic basket of deathlessness through the celebration of death. So the celebration of death is to transcend death and go to the deathless. So death has been posed, as Dr. Pandey was wonderfully saying before us. So the death has different definitions at different levels. I am introduced to mathematics. I'll keep it small because we'll have many rounds of discussion. Yes. So I get the numbers in class 1, 2, 3, and my teacher teaches me. But in about class 4 and 5, I play with those numbers. I say 2 plus 4 is equal to 6. And then in class 8 and 9, I put an X into it, I put a Y into it, I form calculus and equation, and then I cross the school level, and then I solve differential calculus and integral calculus. And that is essentially I differentiate the numbers into blocks, and I see the death of a number. 4 is replaced by 5, 4 plus 1. So that means 4 is just transformed into 5. The death of 4 is actually the birth of 5. You just add 1 to it. So I get into the differential, the integral layers of numbers. This is the beauty of Indian number systems, which was discovered by the Indian rishis. And Laplace, the great French mathematician, says what we are discovering today in the 16th and the 17th century was discovered by the Indian rishis thousands and thousands and thousands of years back, because numbers are just not absolute. The absolute truth is not the complete truth, but numbers are also by position, by power, which Vladimir was saying. So it is just not Satchit, but it's also Chidananda, so the bliss. And there is also the Sri, which is the beauty. So when Satchit penetrates with Chidananda, the Sri is from the beauty of the universe. And what is the beauty of the universe? The beauty of the universe is that Tagore says, in the words of Sri Aurobindo, Kushumo jhoriya pore, Kushuma fote. Kushum means flower, Kusum. In Latin, it has become cosm. And that's why we have the words microcosm and macrocosm, which is the flower of the small and the flower of the large. The ancient Greeks say there is a recursion. There's a correspondence between what is happening inside my body and what is happening in the whole universe. The entire universe is reflected within the body, and the body reflects. So if the body dies, nothing happens. The individual prana, the vital, the angirasa, just melts into the entire ether. The difference, as Dr. Alok Pandey was saying, the difference is that for the ordinary human being, it is called the second death. It's there in the Bible. We die, we just die in that last moment. But for yogis, he's dying every day, because he's taking out the prana at every asana, and he's going beyond the body. He's getting into astral travels, and he's coming back to the body. St. Paul, there's a word in the Bible where St. Paul says, I die every day. And Paramahansa Yogananda mentions that in his Science of Religion. He says, look at this sentence, which means St. Paul was a yogi. So that means in the beginning of Christianity, yoga was there, which was not pursued later in Christianity. So Christ was also a yogi. But that's a separate discussion. So this entire journey, the fear of death, imaginary fear of death, is actually to transcend. I'll come to the Isha Upanishad later, as the discussion proceeds, is actually the celebration of immortality. So Maratu, which is Mrittu, is Moratu, which is mortal. So the words also come from the same word. And Amaratu, which is Amritya, is also Immoratu, which is immortality. So which means the civilizations were connected with these concepts, but through ages we have been disconnected. And now a time has come again where the US and the Greece is again connected with India and other things. So, and that's a celebration of death.
Wonderful, Joyda. Thank you so much for your thoughts on this. And the line of Tagore, Marana Hetu Mama Shyama Saman. That reminds me of one of my articles I wrote exactly 20 years ago, because 2001 was a year when we had 3 deaths in my family. And everyone was wondering that, oh, I should have been shattered and broken and crying. And fortunately for me, I've had people, especially my own mother, who was also a devotee, prepare me for her departure, saying that it's a utsav, it's a mahotsav. So you need to celebrate. And that's where I realized that the mother has also written a lot on how do you prepare for dying, because we all know theoretically or cognitively we say jatasya hi dhruvo mrityu, or we all know the story of Yudhishthir and Yaksha. However, we none of us are actually trained into this. None of us actually get a train how to, one, be prepared for this transition into dying of people in our family, in our community, in our loved ones. or our own departure. So
Yeah.
Vladimir, would you want to share your insights on this? How do we prepare for dying?
It's quite a question, yes. It's quite interesting that we are meeting on 21st of December. Notice
Yes.
the winter solstice. It's exactly the deepest night. Now this is the transition from death to life, actually. So notice it's quite interesting. We are going down with the sun and then we are going up with the sun. So we are going up and down constantly. We are never going down only. We are always rising from the deepest diving. And it is very similar in integral yoga when it is described by the mother and Sri Aurobindo that the higher you rise, the deeper you dive. Our journey is not linear and not only up, up, up. It is up and down deeper. The higher up, the deeper down. Why? There is a reason for it, and we have to take everything which is unregenerated, everything which is to be brought into light within this universe. We are here, these workers of the divine, as it were. We came here to redeem the fallen self, as it were, in the first creation. And so this redemption is taken by us onto our bodies, onto our lives. We are here constantly transforming with our effort, with our spiritual effort, this unregenerated fallen being, as it were, which we also represent. We represent both. We represent something totally conscious within us and totally unconscious without us. So, and all the grades of this consciousness within us, from within to without. So this was seen as the sacrifice in the Veda. We take on to ourselves anything which is to be offered to the higher consciousness and offer it. Our purpose is constantly to offer, only to offer to the higher consciousness. And it should take it and transform it. And this is the journey, what we are here to do. Yeah. How to prepare for death? It's quite a question. You see, I'm not even answering it. But what is interesting, and that was the question of someone here to Alok about how come that we may come to the same formation in the next life, that from subconscious it will come back to us. And what came to me is that when the soul is dying, we have this vision of our life. In one moment, we see all the most essential elements of our life. And it's like running like a film in front of our eyes. Many people speak about this, those who survived, for example. Some people who fell from the height, when they fall, they see the whole life. Why do we see the whole life in the essence? Because we make a decision at the end of our life what we will do next. We must make a decision. And this is the link, actually, to what you are asking, the very difficult question, how to prepare. Even if you don't prepare, your soul will do the choice. Yeah. So our mind may know very little about it or very much about it, but it is kind of useless in a way. If we didn't live the whole life with this dedication, with this sacrifice, with awareness that we are offering all our selves to the higher consciousness, if we didn't live that life, if we didn't establish the habit, it would be very difficult at the end of our life to really even remember where we are going or something. Aurobindo makes fun about it. He jokes about it. All his life he lived, sinful life, and at the end he confessed, and now he is free to go. It will not happen that way, because the habit of living, the mind, vital, is pulling us back. It doesn't leave us, doesn't give us a choice to be free. It's not so easy to become free at the end. It has to become a habitual for the mind and the vital to constantly seek higher formation. And that's why it's important to live life in accordance with this ideal. And at the end, there will be something which I do not know what, but there will be a right choice made by our soul to experience next, in the next life, something we need for our development. And some people think that you will be born always better and better. If you were born a king, you will be born a greater king. It's not like that, Mother says. Yeah, you may be born a shoemaker. You were a king, and now in the next life you will be a shoemaker. Why? Because you need that experience for your soul development. You need that particular experience which you are looking for to fulfill something in yourself, some more holistic being which could live this holistic life, total, infinite life, as Alok was mentioning. We want infinity. We want to be everything. And so we collect all these bits and pieces over our lifetimes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I think this is where our own paradox is, right? And I think Alokji also briefly mentioned that paradox. Because at one level, we all want infinity and immortality. And at another level, we are so enclosed and encased in our own ego and identity that we don't want to break open. And unless we break open, how do you become one with the infinite? Or how do you go beyond who I am, Malaka Padiachi at the moment? And what will I do with Malaka Padiachi becoming immortal, right? So it's not this physical self or the name and identity, all the habits that I've gathered that I want it to become immortal, right? So there is a constant inner struggle. And I would love to share the quotation very beautifully that I could find on something that the mother had written on how do you prepare for dying. And she has written that this suggestion of death comes from the ego when it feels that soon it will have to abdicate. Keep quiet and fearless. Everything will be all right. Death is not all what you believe it to be. You expect from death the neutral quietness of an unconscious rest. But to obtain that rest, you must prepare for it. When you die, you lose not only your body and at the same time the possibilities of relation with an action on the material world. But all that belongs to the vital world does not disappear with the material substance. All your desires, attachments, cravings persist with the sense of frustration and disappointment. And all that prevents you from finding the expected peace. To enjoy a peaceful and eventless death, you must prepare for it. And the only effective preparation is the abolition of all desires. If you wish to escape from death, you must not bind yourself to anything perishable. And I felt this was so beautiful. Ultimately, you know, what you explained somewhere fits with the essence of what she has shared here. Joyda, would you like to add something from Ishobnishad that you started with?
Yeah, okay, yeah. We are just, I think I was listening to Vladimir, and the first part of his speech, the second phase, and he was talking about the rise and fall. It's like it's absolutely, which was I was trying to explain also the rise of the new waves as against the old waves. So it's not a question of the death of one wave or the rise or the birth of a new wave. What is the mystery? The mystery is the old wave, which is dying and it's submerging, becomes the water, which is the sea, the ocean itself. And what is that new wave, which is again rising with new hope, like a newborn child or a newborn flower? It is that same water of the ocean which is coming up. The only difference is why we are imagining fear, why we become restless, why we cannot prepare ourselves for death, because we are not connected with that backdrop or the sea, the eternal sea. We think we are, that's what Swami Vivekananda spoke at Chicago, the second speech. We are the frog in the well, but we cannot come out of that well and become the frog of the sea. Swamiji gave just a 3-minute speech after his brilliant first speech. So India's gates were opened, and then Sri Aurobindo came after Swamiji, to open the gates farther. In that second speech was just 3 minutes, or I think it was 2.5 minutes. I mean, why we disagree. And Sri Aurobindo gives a beautiful, I think one of the best definitions that's available in the Gospel of Truth. Somebody asked Sri Aurobindo towards the end before he left his body. That's what we say in India. We don't die, we leave the body. Nobody dies. And yogi or Mahayogi or a Maha Yogishwar like Sri Aurobindo, there's no question of death, just leaves the body. So somebody asked him, what is the definition of spirituality? And Sri Aurobindo was very quiet towards the last few years. He hardly used to speak. Vladimir knows more about the details and everything. But he just opened up and spoke once after the question was asked 3 or 4 times. Sri Aurobindo said, and this is so important, and he said, spirituality is the destruction of the individual personality, and it is a construction instead within the cosmic personality. So the same personality destroys himself or herself as an individual. Because if you're an individual, you have the concept of mortality, because I die, I'm born again, But the moment you're interconnected, today interconnection is so well proved by computer science and information technology. Suppose you're working in front of a computer. I'm working in a lab and my computer collapses. There is a virus and my computer collapses. But if I am a lab boy, if I'm a part of a group, if I'm a part of a collective group of people working in a lab, I leave my computer and I take another machine which becomes my computer. Because there is a LAN, which is a local area network, which is just not my computer. Today, by virtue of science, you can explain these abstruse concepts. So that means I am dead by virtue of my first computer, and I open up my second laptop. I'm not dead there because the network, the www, the World Wide Web is open. So I open up my second laptop, I'm alive there. And then my friend says, come to my computer. This is a slightly bigger screen and you can see Maladi and Vladimir better. So I go to the third computer. So I'm not dead with my single computer. I am in the lab. I'm interconnected. So the concept of immortality is interconnected consciousness. So a simple example of a lab consciousness, a computer man who can open up different terminals at the same point, who can open up different things at the same point. Like the way you become a lab man, in the same way you prepare your individual life so that you're connected with other souls, other niches, other ecosystems, other avenues of life. And you go beyond, and as Alokji was saying, after the Vaishya, the Kshatriya, he goes out and becomes sovereign, he wins. And then he loves his own people. He becomes a sovereign king, a Raj Chakrabarti. And then he becomes a Brahmin. He finds something more deeper. So what is happening? So these 4 levels are nothing else but I'm just coming from my Shudra single computer and I'm getting to the second computer. So I'm transacting between 2 computers with a local area network. I become a Vaishya. And then I become the in charge of the lab. I become a Kshatriya. I become the in charge, the king of the lab. And one day I give the responsibility of the lab to another boy, and I become the in charge of the whole building, which has hundreds and thousands of labs, hundreds and thousands of interconnections. Matrix, that movie, James Cameron's Avatar, interconnectedness in the planet, planet. So I become a Brahmin, and then I become even beyond that. I go beyond my Brahminical consciousness. I become Parabrahman, Guru Deva Parabrahman. I go to that supreme consciousness. So just see with this very ordinary examples, which we think material, computer science, we can explain the highest concepts that were preached by the rishis today. They're so simple. The only thing is, if we have the mind and the intent to understand them, then they're open for you. So the frog of the well suddenly becomes the frog of the sea. That is Swamiji's second lecture at Chicago. And why we disagree? Because we don't want to come out from the well. The moment you come out of the well, you become the frog of the sea. So that is essentially the Mandukya Upanishad. Just seeing that Mandukya Upanishad, there's no frog mentioned. In that whole Upanishad, you'll never see the word Mandukya, which is a frog. But the entire Upanishad is talking about the transition from the Annamaya Kosha, from the body consciousness, and then transcending the Vijnanmaya Kosha, going to the Anandamaya, and then going to the Ananda Sharup, going even beyond the Anandamaya and going to the Ananda Sharup. And then from the Ananda Sharup, with thousands of waves coming up from that ocean, he finally settles with a few waves and goes deep into and then he finds the power of the sea, which is the Chit Shakti, which is Chidanandamaya. And then he discovers that it is that one ocean. He discovers that one pervading truth. I think I'll end there. I'll take up the Isha Upanishad right after this in the third discussion. And then he becomes, then he realizes the religion of the sea. So from the religion of the well, Kupa Mundakam, he moves on to the religion of the sea, the Samudra Mundakam, which is the whole intent of the journey. We open ourselves. Yeah, thank you.
Dhanyavad, Joyda. And this actually reminds me, that I would love to listen to Valdamir's, his thoughts on the 5 myths of immortality in Indian tradition. And also, why Sri Aurobindo chose Savitri, the myth of Savitri. Why did he choose that? Because we've been talking from Alokji till now, we have been referring and going back and forth from Savitri.
Yes, I was planning that to speak on these 5 myths and so on, because I was thinking, what should I say about death and beyond death? And wanted to connect Indian tradition, that it was always preoccupied with these fundamental questions of what is life? What is really life? And we have beautiful myths, and we know some of them, Samudra Manthana, and we know the Nachiketas in Katha Upanishad, we know Markandeya, the rishi who was given the gift of immortality from Shiva, and we know Shunakshepa myth, which is from the Rig Veda and Aitareya Brahmana, which is profound again, not well known so much, but in Indian, of course, setting it is known, but to a certain extent as a story. But all of them are, and Savitri. Savitri is a profound myth, which Sri Aurobindo picked up for his narration, for the narration of his journey, which is, I was always thinking, why Savitri he picked up, and there is a reason, and he gives that description at the beginning why he chose this myth, because he believed that it was this myth of the symbolic cycle, of the Vedic cycle of myths. And if you remember in Mahabharata, it was Markandeya Rishi who spoke about Savitri. It is Markandeya Rishi narrated the story of Savitri to Yudhishthira. And Yudhishthira asked, was there someone who suffered like Draupadi or even more than Draupadi in this world? And then Markandeya said, yes, there was one. It was Savitri. So, and he starts his narration and he says that Savitri is a very ancient story. You can imagine if it is ancient for Markandeya, who received his boon of immortality in the first Manvantara of this Kalpa from Shiva, and over these all Manvantaras he is the immortal being, 16 years old Rishi, always young, ever young Rishi. It's a beautiful image. And he tells us the story of, ancient story of Savitri. And then and that became really clear why Sri Aurobindo chose this story. What is interesting, what I wanted to mention when I was planning to talk was about Yama, because in the Mahabharata we have Yama as the Lord of Death. He comes, yes, and he fetches the soul of Satyavan and he goes away, and Savitri follows him and talks to him and convinces him at the end, actually wins back Satyavan, yeah? Which is unheard of in any epic literature, because everywhere, as you remember, just look at every story. Once the prediction is made, it has to be fulfilled. We can see how it is being fulfilled. It's never broken. So Narad comes and tells that Satyavan must die and nothing you can do about it. That must be so. And what a surprise was there, that at the end, he is not dying. She wins him back. It's absolutely unnatural for any epic story. I'm telling you that it belongs to really to some amazing kind of past, a very remote past, ancient, archaic past, of which we have no idea. So most probably that is why Sri Aurobindo took the story, because with her will Savitri could conquer death and take back life of Satyavan. And according to Sri Aurobindo, Satyavan is the soul of humanity, and the Savitri is the divine mother who came here as the word of the Surya, of the sun, Savitar. She is the daughter of Savitar. Yeah? She comes to save. And when they debate with the Lord of Death, in Savitri, Sri Aurobindo, in his Savitri, he never calls the Lord of Death Yama. He gives all the names, Savitri, Satyavan, Dyumatsena, Shvapati, every name except Yama. And this is a puzzle. Yeah? Why not Yama? And so I wanted to kind of clarify this. Maybe for many people it will be a surprise, but according to Sri Aurobindo, Yama belongs to, it's the lord of it's the child of Vivasvat. He is Vaivasvata. Yeah? And Yama and Yami in the Rig Veda, these two brother and sister twins, yeah? They are Vaivasvata and Vaivasvati. They are both children of the sun, of Vivasvat. Vivasvat is the Lord of the Sun, who is involved actually into this manifestation. It's another topic. He is the Martanda. He is the one who was drawn into the darkness to start the whole manifestation. It's another myth. But what is interesting about Yama and Yami, that they are both here not as death. They are rather, Yama was first who died and who found the way back to this psychic world, as it were. So he is the representative of the Lord of the Sun. He is here not the killer of the body. He is the savior of the soul. So when Yama comes, he's here to accompany the soul to the psychic world. He's not here to destroy the body. And we kind of mistakenly take it as if he is here coming to kill us. No, he's here coming to save us. Why do we need saving? We need saving because that transition, as Alok was mentioning, is very dangerous through the vital worlds. It's like the field we have to cross with many dangers. So the soul is to be accompanied to the other world to find its way, because this infinite universe, you can be lost somewhere. So it needs to know the way, where to go, where to rest, where to, again, to make a plan for new incarnation and to come back. Now, what is interesting, so the Yama sends usually the Sarameya dogs. Sarameya dogs, these dogs with, looking everywhere. And these two dogs are leading the soul, they are protecting the soul from the attacks of the vital world to the psychic world to rest. And in this case, Yama himself comes, and Savitri asks, why did you come? You usually send some messengers to fetch the soul. He says, no, Satyavan is too dear for me. I can't entrust this work to anyone, so I come myself to take him. Now, this is something to think of. Who is this Lord of Death? If it is not Yama, so what is this dying about? And Sri Aurobindo doesn't give him any specific kind of formation. And it's quite interesting in Savitri, when he is conquered already by Savitri, that voice which spoke to Savitri continues to speak, but already as the Lord, as the voice of the highest Lord. This is something very weird about Savitri, I must tell. So Yama and Yami, this is what I was planning to talk, but due to the constraints of time, maybe I will not go too much into it, but just mentioning that they are both on both shores. Yama is in that world, taking soul to that world, and when the soul is ready to engage, Mother describes this very beautifully. The soul sees the light. The light is giving, like blinking, or giving us the signal where the plan of the soul can be fulfilled, where to plunge. So there are choices for the soul to go. And I was thinking, who is giving this light from another side, from the side of Earth? Who is giving this sign for the soul to come? And then I thought it was Yami, who was left on Earth. It is another twin who is doing the work, who is accompanying the soul back to the embodied state. And from here, Yama takes her back to that state where it can rest. This is a beautiful vision of the Veda, which is totally misunderstood and misinterpreted by Western scholars and then Indian scholarship. But I wanted this for us to see how beautifully it was depicted in the Rig Veda. Yeah, thank you.
Wonderful. Such a profound wisdom that you have shared. We would have really missed this if you had not shared with me earlier that you would like to share these insights. And it's so profound, and it's just next week that Sampatji and me, we are doing a program together, Supraja, which is on conscious parenting and birthing. And now I understand it's the Yami which is going to be helping us deliver this program, right? Because how do you attract the right souls back on the planet? So it's so beautifully, all the dots are like getting connected. Joyda, now maybe Ishavasyam or Ishopanisha.
Yeah, actually, Vladimir has given us the ticket to enter the double ladder, the two-way ladder, ladder. And Sri Aurobindo says, it's not beautiful, it's much more than beauty. It's a divine explosion. the last paragraph, it's a small book, the mother. I mean, there's a big book and from where a small book is made. I mean, he says the Satchidananda right up there and the disciple right down here. The disciple thinks by virtue of all his or her tapasya, he or she will be able to climb bit by bit, bit by bit, bit by bit, and one day in some life, he or she will be able to reach that highest plane. And even the sages in the highest level think that the grace of Satchidananda will, bless the disciple or the aspirant. That's the right word, an aspiration, aspriha, one of the most important word given to the universe, to the humanity by Sri Aurobindo, aspriha, the aspiration. And Sri Aurobindo gives the mystery, he unlocks like Sri Ramakrishna. I mean, after Sri Ramakrishna, it is Sri Aurobindo. I mean, Sri Ramakrishna does that in a very simple language, and Sri Aurobindo converts that into a PhD thesis, which is Life Divine. And Dr. Haridas Chaudhary takes that to the United States, and that's a different story. That creates Maslow and others, that's everything. The hierarchy of mind. And Sri Aurobindo says, between the two, the fire of aspiration from below and the grace which shall come from above, there's only one which can bridge the two ends. That's the gift, the grace, the blessings of the Divine Mother. The Parat Para Chit Shakti, the Mother alone can bridge the two ends. And this is where, as Vladimir was saying, most of the interpretation of spirituality, I mean, we can call it Indian spirituality because in India, there was a primacy. It has been practiced maximum compared to other countries in the world. But spirituality is spirituality. It belongs to whole humanity. It is only Mother alone who can bridge the two ends. And this clue is provided by Isha Upanishad. It's provided by Isha Upanishad. The whole foundation of Isha Upanishad is based on this two-way ladder, the juxtaposition which Vladimir was beautifully saying, the Yama and the Yami. And Yama and Yami is expanded in the two separated verses and then the two conjoined verses. Isha Upanishad presents that beautifully. It's written by a group of sages who represents even an archaic age of sages. And it's actually the sage of sages, the Param Rishis, Sapta Rishis, and one lineage of the Param Rishis is Bhrigu, Bhargavi, and sage Markandeya is from that lineage. I don't want to get into all that because that takes into a certain lineage. So the Isha Upanishad says that if somebody finds nothing good in this world, I mean, this world is absolutely false. It's Maya, it's transient. Everything is temporary. And he just thinks there is something else beyond this world and finds no utility with this world. He enters into a much larger darkness. And there's another group of people who thinks that beyond this world, there's nothing. In this world, and there's fun and frolic, and you find all the utility, and there's nothing else to go. You just enjoy. And they enjoy another kind of darkness, which is lesser darkness. So, look at the beauty of it. The people who enjoy this world and deny the other world, they enjoy lesser darkness. And the people who defy this world and thinks about a world beyond, Brahma Shakta Jagat Mithya, they enjoy a deeper darkness. So deeper darkness is reserved for them. And that comes from the separation of the two foundation blocks of creation, which is Vidya and Avidya. So Vidya and Avidya, if it is not properly, so Vidya and Avidya, if it's not properly handled, then it becomes Pap Punya, or good and evil. So the lower portions of Indian religion, including Hinduism, Buddhism, and all the Semitic religions, has been entrapped by this dialectics of a good God against an evil Satan. So you don't have a concept of a supreme cap on the top. So there is a conflict. But then the Isha Upanishad gives the mystery. Here it's a double mystery, I mean, and I cannot explain it because I'm not an authority, but I'll try to say whatever I know. Is it, he says that he who understands that both of them are the two wings of creation, Vidya Vidya Mamatanu, the Gita says, that's a beautiful line in the Gita. I mean, Krishna says the good and evil are the two sides of my, and when good and evil becomes my left hand and my right hand, they are transformed into Vidya and Avidya, the two wings. That's like Prophet Zoroaster flying like an eagle. That's a symbol of ancient Zoroastrianism, which is from the Atharva Veda. Then what happens? Then by virtue of Avidya, I'll go a little slowly. By virtue of Avidya, you transcend death. Why? How do you do that? Because if you don't have Avidya, you won't commit mistakes. And if you don't commit mistakes, you don't charge the law of causation. If you cannot charge of the law of causation, you don't get out of a body and you need to incarnate in another body to fulfill the unfulfilled task in the previous births. So avidya is not the cause of evil. Avidya is the cause of good. And it charges transmigration, metempsychosis. And you go on from one body to the next body. You go from one death to the death. So by virtue of avidya, you transcend, by virtue of avidya, you transcend death. You transcend death. You transcend death. That is the beautiful thing. So avidya is seen as a gift of the mother. That's the beauty of Isha Upanishad. On the one hand, and on the other hand, by virtue of vidya, which is meditation and satyagyuna and visuddha sattva, you bring down the immortality from above. So he or whoever it is can see the two as the same side, the two sides of the same coin. He, by virtue of avidya, transcends death. That's ascent of human mind. And by virtue of vidya, he makes the amrita descend. So as the end of it, you have a binary composite. So from this side of infinity, in the words of Swami Vivekananda, he said that in practical Vedanta, you're going to the other side of infinity. And by virtue of vidya, from the other side of infinity, you come to this side of infinity. So it's a crossover. And when you understand that, then you know that this whole world is actually not a dhoka. It is actually a sports. It is a sports of Purusha and Prakriti, Shiva and Shakti. Biparit Ratatura, opposite. They are not in opposition to each other. They are complementary. They are complementary. So this is the path of Shiva, which is ascent. And this is a path of Tantra. That is yoga and this is Tantra. So yoga takes you from this side to that side. And Tantra brings you from that side to this side. So one who knows the two as one, he becomes, and to him, Krishna says, Sarvabhutastatmanam, that is one side. I am here in everything on this side of the river, in each and everything. And he just says, Sarvabhutani chatmani. But I am also there on the other side where everything is in that. So that sloka is also there in the Isha Upanishad, which gets repeated in the Gita. So where I get that two-way power of seeing in everything that, and also seeing in that everything. He who can see the two things together, ikshate yoga yuktatma sarvatra shamadarshana. Sri Aurobindo calls that the supramental, the vijnana. That is the vijnana. So for him, there is neither death nor there is life, because he is interconnected. He's everywhere. So where will he die and where will he be alive? The question of life and death is transcended. He becomes integral. He becomes integrated. He becomes akhandanananda. He becomes akhand. And that is the supreme summit of Sri Aurobindo. And he explains that through the ascending triangle and the descending triangle, which is also the Star of David of ancient Judaism. But Judaism, in course of that, lost that original wisdom, and it became a Semitic religion later. But in India, by virtue of tapasya, by virtue of gnosis, 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 sadhana. So we don't believe in a God above. We believe in a God within. the Chaitya Purusha. So on the other side of the river, you have Param Purusha. And on this side of the river, you have Chaitya Purusha. You have Chaitya Purusha. So who is going to take us to the other side of the river? The Chaitya Purusha on this side of the river. And who is going to bring us again back to this side of the river? The Param Purusha. But who finally guarantees the two journeys? It is the mother alone, who guarantees the relationship between the Chaitya Purusha on this side of the river, the psychic soul, and the Param Purusha, the transcendental supreme soul, on the other side of the river. So this is actually the foundation, the completeness of Indian spirituality. A time has come with the coming in of Sri Aurobindo and the mother. Vladimir is there as a living representation of that truth, that complete truth of Indian spirituality shall be unfolded. And the mystery of death as well as life will be solved. Thank you.
Dhanyavad. This was so beautiful. And I do realize that the time we have is very less to actually touch upon such a very profound subject as death, dying, and beyond. Because unfortunately, we are always told it's ashubh, don't even talk about death. However, I truly believe that if we integrate this as a part of our growing up, if we understand this, then there is no fear, and we'll be able to deal with everything, making our life more beautiful with each life that we take rebirth as. Satyajit, I hand it over to you for the Q&A and the gratitude ceremony.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Professor Malaka Padiachi. So yeah, we have 9 minutes more, so we can take a couple of questions. So there is one question by Pragya Upadhyaya. She's asking that how the educators need to address the untimely death of the parents of the children in big numbers right now in our schools. So this is the question.
Okay, so this is who take? Vladimir, you want to take it, or I? Yeah, actually, so we are on this side of the river, and we have the conflict. We have created an education system which is reductionist. It has divided spirit and matter. So spirit is antimatter, and matter is anti-spirit. So our entire current education policy is guided by this. So based on that, the students are stressed, and the untimely death of the students are causing even more anxiety in the current situation of the pandemic. Deaths are always there, but not right now. The recurrence of death and the possibilities of death, the anxiety around the possibilities of death is very high. So what has to come? So if you go to the book, The Foundations of Indian Culture by Sri Aurobindo, the interesting thing is that we have colleges and schools who are going to talk about Indian knowledge system. But I think one of the first textbooks of Indian knowledge systems is The Foundation of Indian Culture. So Sri Aurobindo talks about education there. And Indian education system is essentially akhand. It's integrated. But the education that we are imparting in our schools is absolutely reductionist. It's differentiated. So that's why I'm a teacher at IIT Kharagpur, and I'm not equipped with the vocabulary, neither the understanding of helping my students, because a blind man will lead another blind man, because I don't have that knowledge. So what happens? There needs to be a great change in our education system, where at the heart of the education system, as Mother founded in the education of Aurobindo, that is an example, as Gurudev Rabindranath founded in Shantiniketan, and a few others, where at the center of bookish education, and as Swamiji has said, if education means books and libraries and all that, then that's the end of education. These are the words of Swami Vivekananda. So with the present system of education, it is almost a failure. So the answer is actually a tough one, and there's a long way to go. And the current humanity is at stress. And I think the policymakers and people like Joyce Sen and others will soon realize that there needs to be We treat our students as commodities. I'll just end with this. How many of us teachers, treat our students as our own sons and daughters? Education begins there. You go to the schools and colleges, you'll see as if it's like Pink Floyd's "We Don't Need Your Education." That's an English song. Boys are coming in and girls are going out. Girls are coming in, boys are going out. So people are just getting educated for jobs and money, but not for education's sake. You want to be a computer science because it's getting the maximum number of jobs. You don't love computer science because of its relationship with physics. And there's no teacher in computer science who will show you that linkage between physics and computer science, because they think physics is a backward topic which was taught about 70, 80 years back when Meghnad Shah or Shattan Bose, they became physicists. So these are serious problems in our education society. So if we cannot even solve the educational problem, how can we solve simple ideas about anxiety, imaginary fear, and the fear psychosis that drains our students? Because the teachers are driven by the fear psychosis. So how will a blind man guide another young blind little boy? That's a big question. I think I've just initiated the answer. I could not answer fully. That's it.
Thank you. For this is a very sincere answer. This is lovely to hear. Really, we do not have the answer to this within our mindset or within our vocabulary or way of thinking. How can we really address this? There is a beautiful other question here, as you see, yes? Why does God send the soul to earth? This is a really profound question. Why does he need to make this cycle? He is God. Why he makes this eternal play of soul, matter, energy, etc.? Why all this trouble? He is omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent. Everything is within him. Why to go to the extent of this death and suffering and finding oneself? This is a profound question, and the answer is somewhere given by Sri Aurobindo and the Mother, of course, in the way that Mother says that, you see, he possesses himself in his supreme identity. He has everything within himself. He needs nothing really. But he wanted to experience himself in unity, if it makes sense, some sense. So he wanted to be many, as in Indian tradition they say, Bahusyam, may I be many. What does it really mean to be many? It means to experience oneself in unity. As Mother says, he wanted to have an additional Ananda, if you can say so. Can you imagine? The one who has all Ananda wanted to have some additional Ananda. And so how did he get there? Because each focal point of consciousness can generate from it's the supreme in this particular view, focal view, which gives you again the whole vision of the whole in a particularly unique entry. And through this, he can generate unique relations with himself. And these unique relations multiply, infinitely multiply his Ananda. So this is why he went to this trouble to create this world.
The trouble of creation.
Thank you so much. So it was very interesting and thought-provoking to hear the perspectives about life, death, dying, and beyond. Thank you so much, Professor Joysenji and Dr. Vladimir Yatsenko for your time. It was a privilege to have you both for this webinar and the panel discussion. So I would like to thank Professor Malaka Padiachi for moderating the panel discussion. And finally, I would like to thank all our participants for joining for the webinar and the panel discussion. Thank you so much. Dhanyawad.
Dhanyawad to all of you.
Oh, hello,
Thank you,
Sampanandaji. Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah,
Thank
It
you.
was really wonderful.
Yeah, Sampanandaji, I was in a preceding session and I was almost dying there. So when I came to this session, I enleaved it with Vladimir and all of you. I started. So I realized it myself, what is death and what is life.